At just 12 years old, a boy from a small town in Pennsylvania began selling jars of horseradish made in his mother's kitchen. He used a horse and cart, kept careful ledgers, and built a loyal list of customers who trusted his product. What started as a local food hustle would slowly grow into something far greater. Decades later, the same name printed on those early jars would appear on millions of ketchup bottles around the world. But this transformation wasn't luck. It was a series of deliberate moves, relentless work, and bold decisions that defied the norms of his time. This is the story of how a young boy turned a backyard recipe into a global empire and built one of the most powerful and recognizable brands in the history of food. The garden that raised him. In the small town of Sharpsburg, Pennsylvania, a few miles outside of Pittsburgh, the Heinz family made their home near the Allegheny River. Henry John Heinz, born in 1844 to German immigrant parents, was the third of 9 children in a Lutheran household that valued hard work, discipline, and self-reliance. His father, John Henry Heinz, was a brickmaker. His mother, Anna Margaretha, maintained the family's large garden, which provided the household with food and modest income through market sales. By the time Henry was old enough to walk, he would often join his mother in the garden each morning before school. The plot, carved into a sloped stretch of land behind the house, produced onions, beans, cabbage, cucumbers, and especially horseradish, a pungent root that grew well in the region's soil. Anna taught Henry not only how to plant and harvest, but also how to prepare and preserve the produce. Horseradish, when ground fresh and sealed in waxed glass jars, became one of their valuable items, appreciated by German-American households for its strong flavor and digestive benefits. At just 8 years old, Henry began managing his own small rows in the garden. He tracked his plantings, harvest times, and weights with pencil and paper. He learned how to wash the roots, peel and grind them, and properly pack the finished product into reusable jars. Anna supervised his early attempts, but he quickly became independent. A nearby grocer, impressed by the freshness and cleanliness of the jars, began placing regular small orders. Henry delivered them himself. His methods were practical and disciplined. He wasn't just mimicking his mother's work. He was already applying early forms of inventory control, product presentation, and customer delivery. This wasn't a child's hobby. It was a personal training ground where he combined labor with observation and instinct with discipline. By the time Henry turned 12, he had already developed a system for growing, processing, and selling food. What came next would not be a continuation of garden chores. It would be the start of a structured business powered by his own name. Horseradish hustle at 12. By 1856, at just 12 years old, Henry John Heinz made a decision that separated him from most boys his age. With his parents' permission, he leased 3/4 of an acre of land behind their family home in Sharpsburg. Using his savings, he purchased a horse and a small cart. The land was planted with produce, but his primary crop was horseradish. It was a crop he knew well, having helped process it for years. Now it was his responsibility, from soil preparation to final sale. Henry's daily routine was intense for a boy his age. After completing his schoolwork, he managed the crops, prepared the jars, and personally delivered them to customers. His horseradish was packed in clear glass jars, a feature that allowed buyers to see the purity and cleanliness of the product, something competitors often ignored. He sealed the jars with wax, labeled them by hand, and organized deliveries using a simple but effective ledger system. His horse-drawn cart became a familiar sight around Sharpsburg and Pittsburgh's working-class neighborhoods. Customers began calling the product Heinz's White Root, a nod to the clarity and bite of his horseradish. His customer base expanded beyond individual households. Some local restaurants began placing small but regular orders, appreciating the consistent quality and prompt service. His polite manner, reliable delivery times, and organized records made him more than just a child vendor. He operated like a young professional. By the time Henry turned 14, his profits allowed him to reinvest in better tools, purchase higher-grade glass containers, and expand his cultivation area. He understood which soils produced stronger roots and adjusted his planting schedules accordingly. The precision and effort he applied to each step of production gave him a clear advantage over others selling similar products. He wasn't chasing quick success or thinking in vague terms about business. He was building something with structure. Each sale wasn't just income, it was a reinforcement of trust. With every jar, he was proving that even a teenager could build a real operation with consistent quality and a name people could count on. But Henry's ambitions would not stop with homegrown produce. The next step would test his ideas on a much larger scale. Scaling up with a handshake, 1869 to 1875. By 1869, Henry Heinz was 25 years old and prepared to move beyond neighborhood deliveries. He had completed training in bookkeeping and spent years working in his father's brickyard, where he learned both discipline and business structure. That year, he entered a formal partnership with Clarence Noble, a friend from the area, to launch a new venture, Heinz and Noble. Their goal was to bring packaged horseradish to a larger market. Heinz and Noble focused on bottling horseradish in clear glass containers instead of the more common stoneware jars. This was not just a cosmetic decision. Clear glass allowed customers to inspect the product before purchase, removing any doubts about quality or contents. In an era when food safety standards were weak and many companies diluted or tainted their products, this transparency built immediate trust. The product contained no fillers, no preservatives, and no artificial coloring. Henry also emphasized presentation. He introduced handwritten product labels, used carefully embossed company names on packaging, and kept all jars uniformly clean and professionally sealed. He brought his childhood lessons into a commercial environment and adapted them to meet growing demand. With Noble handling sales routes and Henry focusing on production, the business expanded quickly across Pittsburgh and nearby towns. However, the timing of their expansion proved disastrous. When the national financial crisis known as the Panic of 1873 struck, it triggered widespread economic decline. Railroads defaulted, banks failed, and purchasing power fell sharply. Heinz and Noble, which had taken on credit to grow its operations, found itself overextended. Sales dropped, debts mounted. In 1875, the company was forced into bankruptcy. Henry sold his home and used his personal funds to cover obligations. Despite the collapse, Henry did not walk away empty-handed. He kept his original ledgers and detailed production notes, not out of nostalgia, but because he still believed in the method. The business had failed under economic pressure, not because the product or process was flawed. It was a painful setback, but Henry's resolve did not break. Within months, he began forming a smaller, leaner company with the same core values, and a new plan that would soon change everything. From horseradish to ketchup, after the collapse of Heinz and Noble, Henry Heinz moved quickly to begin again. In 1876, alongside his younger brother John and his cousin Frederick, he founded a new company called F&J Heinz. At just 12 years old, a boy from a small town in Pennsylvania began selling jars of horseradish made. Their first product was horseradish, bottled in the same transparent glass jars Henry had favored before. The jars were hand-labeled and carefully packed, reflecting a renewed commitment to product honesty and presentation. During this same year, he introduced a new product he had been testing quietly in small batches, a tomato-based sauce inspired by imported recipes. It would later be known simply as ketchup. While horseradish remained their core product, ketchup offered a new opportunity. Henry began studying the chemistry of spoilage and how acidity, sugar content, and temperature affected shelf life. He worked to refine both the taste and the stability of the product without relying on artificial preservatives. His approach was systematic. He tested batches, monitored shelf performance, and gathered customer feedback. He also observed public buying habits and began developing packaging that made ketchup more appealing on the shelf. Over time, ketchup started gaining more attention than horseradish, not because of advertising, but because the taste, texture, and reliability exceeded expectations. Heinz never abandoned horseradish, but he recognized where momentum was building. By anchoring every product to the principle of visible purity, he created a growing trust that extended across his entire line. The groundwork had been laid, but now the company needed to scale, and this time the lead product wasn't root-based. It was red and ready for global demand. A red sauce for the world. By the late 1880s, Henry Heinz had fully recognized the commercial potential of ketchup. While his company continued to offer several products, ketchup began to dominate both public demand and internal strategy. Unlike competitors who used sodium benzoate and other chemical preservatives, Heinz insisted on a clean ingredient list. He invested in research to improve acidity balance and shelf life without sacrificing natural quality. His team used distilled vinegar, fresh tomatoes, and hygienic preparation, then sealed the sauce in sterilized glass bottles to maintain freshness through transport. This method was not only safer, but also tasted better. Consumers quickly noticed the difference. By avoiding chemical aftertastes and consistency issues, Heinz ketchup stood out on flavor alone. The company expanded production to meet growing demand, and by 1907, it was producing over 12 million bottles of ketchup every year. The product reached far beyond American homes. Heinz began exporting to the United Kingdom, South America, Australia, and Japan. It became one of the earliest examples of a mass-produced American food product gaining global popularity. To support this growth, Henry standardized his product presentation. He introduced uniquely designed bottles that were slimmer and easier to handle. The narrow-necked glass bottle controlled the pour rate and gave customers confidence that the product inside was fresh and untampered. He also worked with his team to simplify and improve label designs, making them legible, recognizable, and consistent across markets. Retailers took notice. Grocers asked for more shelf space to stock the ketchup. Restaurants, drawn by the sauce's reliability and customer familiarity, adopted it as a table staple. Heinz didn't just build a product, he built infrastructure, with refrigerated storage and precise distribution schedules to maintain quality at scale. Just as the ketchup seemed to need no additional marketing, Henry added a new twist, a single number printed across bottles and factory signage that had nothing to do with product count. The Legend of 57. In 1896, while riding an elevated train in New York City, Henry Heinz noticed an advertisement for a shoe company promoting 21 styles. The number caught his attention, not because it was impressive, but because it was precise and easy to remember. It gave him an idea. Although Heinz was already selling more than 60 different food products at the time, he decided to promote the brand using a fixed number, 57. The choice was deliberate. It wasn't based on inventory. Instead, it was designed to create a lasting impression. The number 5 was his lucky number, and the number 7 was favored by his wife, Sarah. Combined, 57 had a rhythm and visual balance that felt intentional and distinct. It was short enough for signage, odd enough to be interesting, and vague enough to feel limitless. Heinz immediately began placing the number on packaging, factory signs, delivery wagons, and advertisements. It appeared on bottle labels in gold lettering, on walls in large stenciled print, and even on company letterhead. The number quickly became more than a marketing tool. It was an identifier. Customers started associating 57 with quality and reliability, even if they never knew what it represented. The press responded positively. They covered the curious nature of the number and its sudden presence across Heinz facilities. Newspapers reported on how the brand stood out because of the unusual but consistent figure. Other food companies were selling larger product ranges, but none had a number the public remembered. Heinz had turned a simple figure into a symbol of trust. Internally, the number helped unify the growing company. Workers saw it as part of the culture. Sales teams used it in their pitches. Factory visitors remembered it long after their tours. It became a quiet code that traveled with every product across cities and oceans. As Heinz continued expanding both production and reach, he needed more than numbers and slogans. He needed a factory system that reflected everything the brand promised on its label, a place that could scale without compromising trust. A factory that smelled like tomato. By the early 1900s, Henry Heinz had built more than a food company. He had created a model of how factories could operate with dignity and discipline. His main plant in Pittsburgh stood out at a time when many industrial buildings were unsafe, unclean, and overcrowded. Heinz's factory was well lit, ventilated, and kept to the highest sanitary standards available. Floors were covered with white tiles that were scrubbed daily. The air carried no odor of decay or chemicals. Instead, visitors noticed the distinct smell of soap, fresh produce, and cooked tomatoes. Heinz introduced full uniforms for all employees, emphasizing professionalism and hygiene. Workers were provided with lockers, showers, and fresh meals in the company dining area. He hired hundreds of women and paid attention to fair treatment, safety, and workplace stability. Wages were steady, and working hours were more regulated than in surrounding factories. He also supported worker education by offering language classes and Sunday school programs for employees' children. Public trust was a central goal. Heinz understood the importance of visibility in an era when food contamination and fraud were common. He allowed journalists, school groups, and the general public to tour his facility, a rare practice at the time. These tours helped prove that the company's emphasis on purity was not a marketing gimmick. but a consistent reality backed by clean floors, orderly workstations, and well-handled ingredients. Heinz used his growing influence to support national food safety reform. He was one of the key industrial figures who supported the passage of the 1906 Pure Food and Drug Act, legislation that led to stricter oversight of food labeling and production practices across the United States. In May 1919, Henry Heinz died of pneumonia at age 74. By then, the company operated large-scale processing plants in North America, the United Kingdom, and mainland Europe. His products were recognized across continents, and his approach to food manufacturing had become a standard. Though his life ended, one final design decision would carry his legacy forward, a small raised detail on every bottle shaped like the number 57 that would influence how customers interacted with his most famous creation. The empire grows. Following the death of Henry Heinz in 1919, the company he founded continued to operate with the principles he had put in place. The leadership that succeeded him remained committed to the core values of transparency, quality, and consumer trust. These principles guided Heinz through new markets, product development, and decades of expansion. By the mid-20th century, Heinz had become a global brand. The company operated factories across North America, Europe, Asia, and Latin America. It distributed food products to more than 200 countries. Heinz's product range grew to over 6,000 items, including canned beans, baby food, soups, sauces, and frozen meals. Ketchup remained the flagship product, but the brand's reliability helped it lead in multiple categories across international grocery shelves. In the 1980s and 1990s, the company focused on efficiency and innovation. It adopted more advanced packaging techniques, expanded into new regional markets, and adjusted its offerings to meet local tastes. Heinz's presence became standard in supermarkets, restaurants, and institutional food service providers. By the early 2000s, Heinz held dominant market positions in more than 50 countries. Its annual revenue exceeded $4 billion, supported by strong performance in both developed and emerging economies. A major shift occurred in 2013 when Berkshire Hathaway and 3G Capital acquired the H.J. Heinz Company for $23.3 billion. The deal was one of the largest in food industry history and placed Heinz under new leadership focused on global cost control and long-term growth. 2 years later, Heinz merged with Kraft Foods to form the Kraft Heinz Company, a massive multinational with dozens of household brands under its management. Today, Kraft Heinz generates over $26 billion in annual revenue and employs more than 36,000 people. Heinz Ketchup alone sells more than 650 million bottles every year and controls roughly 30% of the global ketchup market, valued at over $2 billion. More than a century after it began as a boy's small business selling horseradish from a garden, the Heinz brand has become a permanent fixture in homes, restaurants, and supermarkets around the world, built on principles that never changed. What do you think about Heinz's journey? Tell us in the comments below. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.